Happy Saturday. You may be noticing a very truncated roster today. It is Paul and I are going to discuss the 2024 release of Thinking Texas Football. Our very own Justin Wells likes to say that when this book comes out, it is the official start of the season. And I would have to agree with him. There is not really a more thorough investigation of the University of Texas program that it gives you the opportunity to see where we've been, where we are, and some predictions on where we're going. And today we're going to talk a little bit about it. But because it is so thorough, we are going to really focus primarily on the offense today. And I want you to treat this particular podcast, particular show as a supplement. We're not going to be able to get anywhere as deep as Paul does in these books. So it's a nice opportunity to get a little supplement of that. So Paul, you have inspired me. As you've been going through this, I've been trying to get better as a host and a journalist. So I've been doing some research myself, thinking of some really good questions. This book has over 55,000 words in it. And I'm just curious, was there one in particular that gave you a challenge?
The word is, also the word the. Those are the main words that I struggle with. But yeah, I got pretty good. I practiced using the words. I wrote sentences. I did spell check. And now the words all make sense somehow. So yeah, over 55.
I found it very, very impressive.
7 pages on Amazon. Yep. And let me just give you guys a quick overview of what it is in case you're unfamiliar with it. Although the chat is already doing its job making me laugh. Sandman says, "Where's the eye candy, Ian Boyd," in parentheses. I hear what you're saying, Sandman. He's a handsome fella. We like to keep him on these, to keep the audience interest, keep the female viewership up. But you guys are going to have to settle for me and LC today. But so the book is the 2024 Longhorn Football Prospectus, Thinking Texas Football. This is the 12th annual edition, LC. I've been writing this since 2013. It is the inaugural SEC edition. And what that meant was I could no longer coast on my institutional knowledge of the Big 12.
Right.
And I actually had to do deep dives on teams that, frankly, I did not know a lot about. I didn't know a great deal about South Carolina and Vandy. But as a college football fan, I certainly knew Bama and Auburn and Tennessee, and of course A&M I keep up with, and OU was not a big stretch for me to write about, but it was great. The biggest burden, the thing that made it such a bear was the sheer number of teams that I wanted to investigate and look at, because I didn't just write our schedule, and of course I did 20,000 words on Texas itself, but I wanted to look at the other 7 SEC teams that we don't play. So I have capsules on them, not quite as thorough as our opponents, but still enough for you to capture the gist. And then I have a lot of other bonus content. Then if you guys love recruiting, which I know you do, Eric Naline was kind and generous enough to write a guest recruiting section evaluating our last class. And at the risk of you not buying the book, he likes it. He thinks it's a good book.
Yeah, it's a resounding endorsement. I think it's great. Well, let's get started, Paul, if it's all right with you. One of the things that you talk about, certainly when you're analyzing the University of Texas and going over our strengths, our weaknesses, obviously going to be the quarterback position. And you refer to Quinn as a contextual quarterback. Can you expand on that a little bit and let us know what you mean by a contextual quarterback?
It is my highfalutin attempt to introduce literary and historical lexicon into a simple game of blocking and tackling. No, so the reason I say this is it's because it's actually true. So Quinn Ewers in his wheelhouse is the best quarterback in college football. Quinn Ewers outside of his wheelhouse is a quarterback in college football.
Right.
And that's the difference. So I wrote about 2,000 words on Quinn Ewers because I think his ability to level up is going to be huge for this football team's upside. And he's got that ability. He's already done it, LC. I don't think people fully appreciate how much he grew from 2022 to 2023. And let me just give you the top line on that. He went from a 132 passing efficiency to 158.
Oh my God.
Went from 7.4 yards per attempt to 8.8 yards per attempt. So if you're not familiar with that metric, it's just a kind of a good, quick and dirty rule. If you're at 7.4, you're a jag as a college quarterback. Okay. You're just a guy. You're fine. You're not bad. You're not terrible, but you're not good. 8.8, you're getting the ball moving it down the field in a very efficient way. Every time you drop back, it's 8.8 yards, basically. And Quinn also went from completing 58% of his passes to 69%. Huge difference there in just basic efficiency. So I can talk about all that. He's leveled up. The point is he still has leveling yet to do. And that's why I talk about him being a contextual quarterback. Let me give you an example. Play action Quinn is best Quinn. When Quinn Ewers gets to run an RPO, or he gets to do the more traditional play action that we all grew up with. You take the snap, you fake the handoff to the running back. There's no read. You pull it out, and then you throw it, down the field or to an intermediate route. Quinn is averaging 10 yards per attempt, and he completes 75% of his balls. That's play action Quinn, and there is no better play action quarterback in college football. There's a couple that are comparable, none better. Non-play action Quinn, and this goes against type because I think the average Texas fan thinks Quinn is a spread quarterback. Let's go 5 wide. Let's spread it out. Let's let him sling it around like he did at Southlake. That's actually the most average Quinn, the most mundane Quinn. So in contrast to the play action Quinn, where it's 10 yards per attempt, 75% completion, straight drop back Quinn, 7.4 yards per attempt, just like he was back in 2022. So he's a completely different quarterback in that context. I'll give you another one. And believe me, I go deep dive on all this stuff, so I'm not giving away the house here. As in terms of getting blitzed or not blitzed. When he gets blitzed, he's a pretty average quarterback. When he's not blitzed, dominant college quarterback. Now, I think there's some reasons for that, and it's not just the blitz in and of itself, although I do think that's part of it. The other part that's important is that you can blitz as a defense, but not get pressure. All you do is speed up the clock, and you have different routes that are open versus not blitzing. And so when he was pressured, he completed 51% of his passes. Now, the thing that people say, it's terrible. All quarterbacks, when they're pressured, and pressuring in this instance means someone is about to hit you, you've been moved off your spot, you're on the run. All quarterbacks deplete under pressure. Lamar Jackson, Peyton Manning, everybody. Quinn really depletes under pressure.
So it's more an issue of that level of atrophy of ability at the time of a blitz. So Sandman23 was asking, isn't that for all quarterbacks? And the answer is yes, it really is. But what is the level of deterioration?
So Sandman, let's make an important distinction. There's a difference between being blitzed and being pressured. A blitz is something the defense does schematically. They bring an extra man or 2 or 3. Not all blitzes get there. In fact, most blitzes don't get there. The quarterback gets the ball out before they get hit or they get sacked or there's a strip fumble. A pressure is a successful pass rush. A pressure could happen with a 3-man rush. A pressure could happen with a 7-man blitz. So that's an important distinction. And you are right instinctively, Sandman. That's exactly correct. But that's an important distinction to make because Quinn Ewers is a contextual quarterback. So one of the things that's interesting is if you break down Quinn Ewers by average depth of target, meaning when he releases the ball vis-a-vis the line of scrimmage, where is that ball going? Quinn is a completely different quarterback at every level.
Can you expand on that? I know you and Ian did a great deep dive on this in particular, and we'll try to link that in there on the specifics of Quinn's mechanics. But it is interesting to watch. You can literally see from the stands different quarterbacks almost based on the route tree.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's interesting about Quinn is people think, his biggest struggles are still deep, 20 plus. Well, from an accuracy perspective, he's still a little below what we want. However, last year, Quinn went from averaging 7.9 yards per attempt on balls 20 plus to 12.6. That's what we want.
Right.
But he only completed 34% of those balls. So when he hit those balls, they went for 36 yards per completion and he had a touchdown every 4 completions on those deep balls. Great. However, at 34%, if we could level him up on those deep balls to 50% and we throw 5 a game, this Texas offense goes next level.
Contextually, since we're sticking with that terminology, what is, like, I don't know the answer to this. What is a very good percentage? I mean, 50% seems high to me for those long balls, or is that I mean, we say that, and then we watched Penix absolutely destroy us last year. So what is a reasonable expectation for a quarterback of this stature?
Great question. You want to be over 40%.
Okay.
Quinn's at 34. He can bump up there. There are college quarterbacks who average 50% or better on 20+ throws. I'll give you an example. Jalen Milroe, at the end of last year, that second half of the year, when he figured some stuff out, he was a 50% deep ball hitter. And that's what made Alabama make the playoffs, frankly. Carson Beck, Dylan Gabriel, believe it or not. That's his superpower. He throws a great deep ball. He doesn't have a strong arm. People always think that your arm strength equates to your deep ball. Your arm strength is more revealed on an 18-yard comeback or a 15-yard out, which, by the way, is Quinn's strongest range. 10 to 19 yards from the line of scrimmage. He is as good as it gets in college football. As an intermediate thrower, he is 12.6 yards per attempt, 69% completions, and just phenomenal in that range. His weakest range, actually, LC, and this is related to the blitz information I gave you, is 0 to 9 yards.
Right.
And that doesn't jive kind of with what you think or the perception of Quinn. But if you go back and watch the tape, it's exactly correct. He averages 6.8 yards per attempt in that ADOT range, and he completes 74% of his passes. Now, you say, that sounds good. Well, if you take Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart, okay, I just pulled 4 guys that are considered to be rough equivalents or peers in passing talent. From 0 to 9 yards, they complete 85% of their balls or better.
Yeah. And
all of them are 7.5 yards per attempt to 8 yards per attempt in that range. Quinn is a significant outlier.
One of the questions here, and this goes into it. By the way, we really do appreciate your questions, Brett. We see you. That is a question that I absolutely want to get to, and we'll move that down to get it a little bit more in line with what we're talking about. But Michael M is asking, and this is a great transition for us here too, Paul, on how specifically he can level up. I mean, We've talked to, like I said, that deep dive, but Michael's asking, is this a vision question? And we don't mean 2020. Is he having difficulty seeing the open people downfield? Is that the issue, or what would you attribute that to?
No, I actually get into this in the book, and I kind of explain why, and I think you'll have to buy the book to fully get it. But I think it has to do with his throwing platform. And I think the thing that we praise him for, his ability to release the ball from a dizzying variety of arm angles and different structural mechanics, that's also his weakness. Many of those routes, 0 to 9 yards, have to do with rhythm, consistency of delivery, and mechanics. What's a classic 0 to 9 yard route? A shallow slant, a shallow out route, a stop route. These are not arm strength routes, LC. You can be a weak-armed, doughy quarterback, and you can hit those routes if you've got replicable mechanics. Quinn Ewers can hit an off-balance 25-foot three-pointer.
Yeah.
He actually struggles with his free throws. And these throws are free throws. Right. And he has got to get a replicable mechanical system where when he drops back on this, typically a 3-step drop on these routes, and he sees blitz, which is typically the out on these routes, throwing 0 to 9, he's got to get a replicable set of mechanics where he's not throwing the ball starting at his hip, or he's not starting way back here, or he's not sidearming it. Just have the ball ready to throw, find a nice, steady release point, and start drilling these free throws. So I get into it much more and explain all this and why this is in the book, and I think you guys will find it edifying.
Let's move a little bit to the people in front of Quinn, the O-line, and this is probably at least certainly in recent memory, it has to be one of our not only strongest offensive lines, but certainly maybe our deepest, just in terms of the rotational players that we can bring in. What are your thoughts? And you, again, I love your phrasing here. You want to talk about the importance of decision maker starts. Can you expand on that idea? What do you mean specifically in relation to the offensive line?
Absolutely. Great question. So this is year 3 of Sark's offense, not only for Quinn Ewers, but for Jake Majors. So Quinn and Jake have started 22 games together. They have 63 starts total. Jake Majors has started 41 games for the Longhorns.
Yeah, no.
It's amazing, including playing through a pretty serious injury last year. I'm not sure people are aware of how injured he was. But the cool thing about that for Sark and his offense is there's 2 decision makers really pre-snap on a football field on your offense. Your quarterback and your center. Your center is setting protections. He's setting blocks. He's telling guys when the defense shifts, hey, you've got this guy. Hey, check that. Base. And he's got to be confident enough to make those calls in a very assertive way. Similarly, Quinn Ewers is a decision maker. He's got to survey that defense and looks before the snap and say, okay, I got it. All right. And then we run some motion and we go, all right, they're in man coverage. Check. And then Jake Majors says, all right, check. And there's this interaction that's happening between the center and quarterback. If either one of those 2 guys is inexperienced, it actually short circuits the advantage of having experience for the other guy, because you have to keep it simple. With Quinn and Jake now having all this time starting together in the same offense, they can do all sorts of stuff at the line of scrimmage to adjust and get out of a bad play. It's not so much what we envision of, we see the right coverage and that we throw the 65-yard open touchdown. It's more, if we run this play, we're effed. Let's get out of it. Let's run left and let's get 6 yards. And then let's live for a better day. And that's the key. And it's going to keep Texas out of a bunch of negative 2nd and 15, 2nd and 12, 2nd and 13 situations, where as an offense, you're behind the pitch count.
We've also got experience and incredible talent over at left tackle, who's on an island for much of his career. And I think I would love to hear a little bit because a lot of people like to think that, and again, as you pointed out, smartest, most heady positions, we've probably got quarterback, we've probably got maybe our safeties, we've got our center certainly, and then we've got our middle linebacker. But that left tackle has to be really on their game. Can you talk a little bit about the experience and what Banks is bringing to this? Just obviously not from a talent point of view. I think that's a known commodity, but just his intellect and how he's seeing the game and protecting Quinn.
Kelvin is a high IQ football player. People talk about his physical skills, which are great. He's got amazing feet for a 320-pound guy. But I think people don't fully talk about his football IQ and how hard he tries. He goes hard on every play. And he's a guy that I think once he feels the opposing pass rusher, you probably know pretty early as left tackle, like, this guy, I've got it handled. I'm good. Or like, okay, this guy's going to push me a little bit. He's going to play a bunch of guys who are going to push him this year in the SEC. But even when he plays a guy that's kind of a scrub, he's not content just to tie. Like, okay, I did my job. He wants to bury that guy and humiliate him. And that's an important thing. He started 27 games for Texas. Of course, all of you know he started as a true freshman. He faced 4 first-round NFL draft pick edges in that freshman season, and he basically tied or defeated all 4 of them, which is incredible. So insane. I hope you guys love Kelvin Banks. I hope you appreciate him, because this is the last year you're going to ever watch him play football for Texas. He is going in the top 10 of the NFL draft.
Let's move on to maybe the one of the more sexier positions on that offense in the wide receiver room. And again, the level of detail you're giving here, Paul, I think really can't be understated. Well, let's first of all, we've got a lot of big names. I want to talk about probably the most important name in that room, and that's Thatcher Milton. Can you expand on Thatcher and let everybody know why he's so badass?
Hey, you know what? Thatcher Milton has an entry in my book because
I
love what this guy represents as a Longhorn. So he's not going to see meaningful playing time because of the talent ahead of him. He killed it in that spring game. I think the joke that I made was that he was like running through the Falklands like he was,
Yeah,
you know,
the
like they were Argentines. Like Thatcher got after it. And the cool thing about this guy, he was a former Houston Touchdown Club Defensive Player of the Year finalist. Like this guy was someone that if you played high school football with, you would have been like, that guy was a stud. I mean, he was all district every year, you know, all region. He comes to Texas. He's a walk-on. He's a mechanical engineering major. Do you know the time like stuck of being an engineering major at Texas? So look, I'll say this, he's not going to play much, but if you're an employer, if you're someone looking to hire someone really sharp, why don't you go hire the guy who played football for the University of Texas as a mechanical engineering major? So that's my Thatcher Milton pitch.
I think there's also this element that I know that this is a known commodity. I know that this is obvious, but when you're looking at that wide receiver room, the depth of that wide receiver room,
crazy.
Obviously we're going to talk about Wingo later, but he's going to be limited snaps purely because of the talent ahead of him, not because of his skill set. But the fact that we have a kid like Thatcher Milton that could be playing in a lot of different places right now as a walk-on, to me demonstrates the program that Sark is building. And that's why I wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out here, because I do think that walk-on program is incredibly powerful. And the idea that Sark is cultivating that and building that up, and the fact that we actually have legitimate talent on that side is really, really impressive. But let's get to the names. Let's move over to this wide receiver room. And one of the big talks, one of the big discussions is Sark's rotations, or maybe lack thereof. What do you see Sark doing this year with that level of depth? Is he, last year he very much went with the ride or die mentality.
So why does Sark do the ride or die? I mean, that's an interesting question, right? The reason is because there's got to be some chemistry and some same page aspect of the quarterback and the receivers. And Sark realizes the best and most valuable reps for that are game reps. You can't simulate and practice all the things that a defense does to you in games. So the more you play the same guys with the same quarterback, the more they're on the same page, right? And you don't have guys running the wrong route and doing stupid stuff. Right. And as the season goes on, you can add more complexity. Here's why Sark is really thinking about playing more than 3 this year. Because although Texas at wide receiver 1 and 2 is not as talented as they were last year, that's Worthy and Adonai Mitchell.
Yep.
Receivers 3 through 7 are miles ahead of where we were last year. And I love Jordan Whittington, but he ain't Ryan Wingo. Okay. He's not DeAndre Moore. He may not even be Silas Bolden. So the problem is, well, the beauty of this is you've got so many of these guys and so many mouths to feed. How do you do it? And I think he's still going to find his 3 that are going to be his ride or dies, but ride or die, it doesn't mean 70 snaps now. I think it means 45.
Yeah.
I think it means 50. And then there's certain guys that, so the big sell on Ryan Wingo coming in was 6'2", 210, physical phenom, just monster. Like after the catch, he's amazing. He's just a great raw athlete, but he's going to need a couple of years to adjust to college football. He's got to learn the nuances of wide receiver. Well, you go watch the spring game and you go, I think he's a little ahead of schedule. Looks like a very refined receiver. Particularly that goal line end zone game-winning catch. We're not the Aggies, so we don't count our wins for the spring game. But, he just looks much more sophisticated than you'd expect. And then in the offseason, a couple of things I've heard is Ryan Wingo is as good or better than what you saw in that spring game. Like, he's just a freak. And he's yes, sir, no, sir, what can I do to get better? He's that
Well, if
guy.
you were at the spring game tailgate that we had at Inside Texas where we did our live feed, Ryan Wingo stopped by afterwards. He wanted to say hi to our very own Justin Wells. They built up a relationship. So we got to meet the Wingo family, an incredibly nice group of people. And I'm very happy. It's one of those things that he's an easy kid to root for. So I'm really glad that we're hearing such positive things about Ryan. Can we talk a little bit? I want to transition just a little bit about slot, because we did talk about Whittington. Whittington will be, I think, forever known as probably the greatest blocking wide receiver that we'll probably see in my lifetime. But what kind of expansion of playbook could we expect having some of these speedsters? Because again, you talked about our Oregon State friend coming over, and a lot of people look at that and think, oh my gosh, this guy's a slot guy, but they're moving him out to the perimeter sometimes. So what can we expect from that position in particular moving forward when we think about Sark's offense?
So even at Oregon State, Silas Bolden, 80% of his snaps were outside, not inside. So people have a perception of him because he's 5'8" and 160 pounds dripping wet that he has to play slot. He can. He actually can win outside. So I asked about him because he came obviously after the spring. He came in June and started doing the 7-on-7s. And so I asked about him. I was like, he's just like a quick guy, a little quick guy. And they were like, he's something more than that. They're like, he goes and like wins balls downfield. Like they said, he's kind of a little freak. And so we'll see when pads come on because that's kind of an equalizer for those little guys. But yeah, we've got a lot of options in the slot. And Whittington, God bless him, amazing guy. There's a reason he was on the cover of my last Longhorn football preview last year. But he was limited. He was limited in some of the things he can do down the field. If you guys recall, he's not a very instinctive ball catcher, like over his shoulder, like running a fade or running a fly route. He's more of a guy that needs to turn and face the quarterback to catch the ball. When you've got guys like DeAndre Moore, Matthew Bolden, I mean, we can move Bond in the slot when we want to hunt certain matchups. We've got multiple guys who can play in the slot, and all of them add some dimensionality that Whittington, frankly, did not add. And so that's an important part of the field to threaten. And we're going to do that with the slot. We're going to do that with Amari Niblack in two tight end sets. But we have so many options and so much versatility with these guys. The thing that really strikes you with all of them, though, is that they're all capable of the big play. We don't have a possession receiver in our depth chart in the top two. These are all guys who, if you get them the ball in the right context, they can take it and score wherever they are in the field. And there's an element of that in your offense that just makes every play a little more threatening for the defense. That if you hit Matthew Golden on the run on a little slant, that dude, once he gets his legs moving and his RPMs up, he doesn't go on the ground real easy. You get Mr. Bond releasing on a go route and you're in single coverage. Once he gets a step, there's no makeup. There's no, oh, I messed up. Let me play the ball in the air. The play's over. The question is, does the quarterback get him in stride? Because it's 6 points and you fire the cannon. So that's a really scary element of this Texas offense this year, even though we lost two guys who would be the best two guys on this receiving core, right? Worthy and of course Adonai Mitchell. But the point that I'm making is receivers 3 through 7, we're so much far ahead of where we were last year. So it's incumbent on Sark to find some way to make that work.
One thing I want to thank here are the friends of ours over at Luxe Luxury Remodeling. They're sponsoring this show, this opportunity for us to talk to Paul, and we want to thank them so much because they are the people you want to go to for your high-end kitchen remodels, your bathroom remodels. They've been in the Austin area for over 3 generations and provide all manner of quality construction services, even for commercial build-outs. So please call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUX, LUX, or you can visit them at luxkitchenbath.com. Again, that number is 833-358-LUX, LUXE. Moving forward, Paul, so you've heard the names, you even just mentioned those names, and I think let's talk about what it means for the offense, what it means for Sark's ability to get a little bit more creative. I know that sounds insane to think that he's got more in the book that we can see, but let's talk about the explosives a little bit. Let's talk about Bond. Let's talk about Golden, Blue, Niblack, Bolden, and Wingo. I mean, again, Wingo is a really unique case because we've got here a truly phenomenal athlete that, again, may be seeing limited time because he's just in such a deep room. Yeah.
Quick teaser on Wingo, and then maybe let's tackle some chats before we dive into this explosives, because I know there's
absolutely. Let's do that.
But Wingo, I think he's going to be a guy that they're going to throw the playbook at in August and see what he can handle. And if he can handle some of it, I think he goes in 15, 20 snaps a game, and he gets 3 targets in those 15 snaps. and they might be what you call high leverage targets. It might be 3 targets, 2 catches, 1 for 10 yards, and another one for 45 and a touchdown. So if he can contribute that week to week, that's a great contribution from Wingo. So bring on the chats, LC.
So we're going to talk to this is our patriarch. Let's be honest.
That's right.
This is our Mr. Brett Nelson has been keeping us afloat for many, many years, and he's asking about the SEC. And let me phrase the question. Do you think playing in the SEC will force Texas to bring their A game more often as opposed to sleepwalking or taking Big 12 schedules as seriously, if that makes sense? And I think what Brett is saying is one of the knocks on Texas up to this point is playing to the level of their opponent. And now that the perceived level of league games is up, do you think that will force them to play above their opponent each week?
That is a great question. I've thought about that, and I actually talk about this specifically in the preview. So you can find a more satisfying, literate answer if you read the preview, Brett. But the verbal version of it, the shorthand is they better, because Houston, what they rolled out against Houston, what they rolled out against TCU last year is not going to cut it. Now, by the way, there's another team that fits that description. Their name is Georgia, and that's what they did last year in several games. If you guys don't know, they played a really close game with Auburn, the same Auburn that got blown out on their home field by New Mexico State. They played a really close competitive game with South Carolina, who was not good. That was a bad football team. They played multiple close and competitive games playing below themselves in the SEC. They're also Georgia, and they got a ton of talent. When they want to turn it on, they turned it on. But I think the point is that's a universal problem for all college football teams. These are college kids, and you sort of don't have your A game every week. But we better develop a hell of a B+ game, because if you think we're going to roll out a C game against Kentucky at home and just roll through them, we will be in for a gross awakening. And you hope that we wake up by the fourth quarter and pull it out. So I think the main point that Brett makes is a great point in that question. Texas does have to raise their level of play. A lot of that comes with consistency, and maybe that comes back to some of the Quinn Ewers, Jake Majors offensive line starts. We've got 124 combined O-line starts coming back. Cam Williams is the outlier. He's only got 1 start. He started against K-State last year and actually did a good job. But that's going to be helpful in maintaining that consistency of performance. And then on the defensive side of the ball, look, they've got some pressure. And we're not going to talk about defense on this one. We'll separate that out. But they've got to raise their game from a game planning standpoint. And I think there's an opportunity for them to do that.
One of the things that has always resonated with me at work or whenever I've been performing or doing anything is the idea that consistency is the great divider, right? Everybody's got the opportunity, and most people can be great once in a while. Yeah. It's the people that can do it consistently is what separates the amateur from the professional. And I think that's going to be the shift, right? It's going to be the shift of, can we raise our level of play on a consistent basis, because we didn't really have to in the Big 12. Now, again, we are going to have some games this season. I'm thinking immediately top of mind, maybe a South Carolina who's not as up as they used to be. And then, of course, we've got our Vanderbilt, who would probably kick our ass in the math bowl, but we're having a little bit of trouble putting up a fight in the on the football arena. So I want to talk a little bit now, moving towards the idea. Let's go back to Bolden a little bit, because you're getting a little bit of a pushback here from David Keith Williams, who's asking, I'm definitely one that has a preconceived view of Silas Bolden. He may have played outside at Oregon State, but I think UT has too many better options outside for Bolden to play at UT in that position. And I think from a numbers perspective, that's a very fair take. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
It is. Unfortunately, the coaches may not agree with you. Silas Bolden can play anywhere, and that's kind of the point I'm making. Every one of these receivers can line up anywhere. Matthew Golden can play in the slot. Bond can play in the slot. We can throw Wingo in the slot if we're hunting a matchup, right? If another team has a 5'9", 170-pound nickel, go put Wingo in there and physically overpower that guy. Put him on his hip and hit him on the run. Or maybe just run the ball at him and make him support the edge. But the point is, we're multiple. And I'm trying to suggest to all of you that although you think Bolden only profiles to the slot, that's not how he was played at Oregon State. And that's not how he will just play at Texas. So you'll have to square that with your own beliefs.
There are a couple of really good questions here in the chat that are concerning our defense. And I just want to give you guys a preview. We are going to be focusing on the defense next week, unless something absolutely massive happens in the college world that we have to address. We will move the Thinking Texas Football Defense edition over to next week, so you can get an opportunity to hear some of that. Then we'll probably take a little break from Thinking Texas Football and get more into the season preview stuff as we get closer to the end of August. But we wanted to talk about explosives, Paul. Let's talk about those guys that we mentioned just earlier, right? The little cadre of Bond, Golden, Blue, Niblack, Bolden, and Wingo.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that stands out for all these guys, so Bond, we know he's a 10,500 meters guy from high school, right? We've seen Bond play. We saw him in the spring game, what he did to Gavin Holmes when Gavin Holmes missed a jab. Like one simple mistake, he missed his jab on press man. Bond got even to him, and Arch Manning hit him, and Bond did the rest, right? So sometimes it's that simple on a football field. So Bond, we know, is capable of a big play anytime he gets the ball in his hands. Golden, he brought back 2 kick returns for touchdowns last year on 9 total returns. So he kind of got hurt and missed a couple of games, but teams just stopped kicking to him. They would kick it like out of bounds if they couldn't make it to the end zone just to avoid Golden getting a return. And if you haven't seen those returns, I think you should pull them up on YouTube, because Golden is not only fast, he's breaking tackles left and right. He's a guy that once he gets going, he's really hard to get on the ground. And Texas defensive backs can attest to that. He had 7 catches against us for 2 touchdowns, people may recall. Blue, my boy, Blue. Look, Cedric Baxter gets all the hype because of his recruiting pedigree. I think Jaden Blue is the most single dangerous offensive weapon on the Texas offense. I think he is a plus receiver out of the backfield. Last year, Steve Sarkisian threw the most balls to the running backs in his history as an offensive coordinator. 71 catches between the Texas running backs. Blue's going to get 35 or 40 of those this year. In addition to the fact that he's a good runner. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten tougher. You guys may recall he had that sweet 29-yard touchdown from Arch Manning on a little Texas route out of the backfield. But the most impressive play I saw from in that spring game, 3rd and short, had to get it yards. Blue got low, got his pads low, and drove his legs and dived 3 yards and took the hard run. When 2 years ago, Blue would have tried to bounce it outside, right? Like every running back does out of high school. They think they can bounce everything outside. I just think Blue is the closest thing I can compare him to is Jahmyr Gibbs, and I don't say that lightly. That dude's a stud. Niblack. Well, I think we know he's fast. When he's coming out of his stance, his first 5 yards are indistinguishable from a running back or a wide receiver. He is fast and he's quick. So he's not just a long strider that it kicks in at yard 30. He's quick off the ball, and that's scary. Is he a blocker? Sometimes sometimes discretion is the better part of valor for Amari Niblack in terms of blocking. But in certain matchups, and we're still going to run 12 personnel, even with all these wide receivers, in certain matchups, if we can get him on a linebacker or more of a run safety, the run support safety, he's a guy that's a huge mismatch. And you may have noticed he put on 10, 15 pounds. So he's up to 245. I don't think he's lost any speed. He's going to be a situational player. There's going to be teams we play where he barely sees the field. There'll be other teams we play where he might be number 2 in the game plan. So Bolden, we kind of talked about that. He's got more to his game than you might think. He is really good also on jet sweeps, fly sweeps, reverses. In his career, he averages 10 yards per carry and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he is nifty in space. And then finally, Wingo, pound for pound, the most talented guy in that receiver room. It's just a question of experience and time.
It's a very comprehensive book, Paul. And I know from just speaking to you over the last few months, the amount of effort that you put into this. And trust me when I say, or believe me when I say, it is something that I look forward to every year, especially this year. I think as you pointed out, the newness of being in the SEC, we all become, as fans, accustomed to seeing certain things. And because across all of college football this year, there's so much newness that comes with it, be it with the Big Ten, the Big 12, and certainly the SEC with Oklahoma and Texas coming in. Your insight into this, I think, is fascinating and very fun to read. I encourage you to check it out, folks. We're gonna put links in the show description for you to download it. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Apple and Smashword. Is that right? If you can, Smashwords, yeah, go ahead and check that out. I think you will be the beneficiary. And also, this is the type of book, the thing that's really great about what Paul does here is it becomes a reference book throughout the season. You're obviously going to sit down and want to read the analytics when it comes to the offense, when it comes to the defense. But when you're starting to get opponent specific, Paul does a phenomenal job of breaking that down. And if you want more of Paul, you want more of Eric, you want more of Justin, please check us out at InsideTexas.com. It's where Paul is writing, and he's got lots of details that come in throughout the week for you and all the fans. If you would use IT1, you're going to get 2 months of Inside Texas for $1. That's obviously going to put us into the season. So again, when you're signing up, go ahead and use IT1 as a promo code, and you will get 2 months of Inside Texas for $1. And one of the questions in the chat, I'll go ahead and answer it now. The question was, when is the NCAA 25 video game IT league starting? You can register at InsideTexas.com right there on the forums board, and we are going to be getting that started up next week. So if you are interested, if you're an NCAA 25 player and you want to play with some fellow Longhorn fans, please go ahead and sign up at InsideTexas.com. You'll have the opportunity to get with us and hopefully have a little bit of fun. Are there any chats in particular, Paul, you wanted to go back to before we sign off here?
Our friend Boo Corrigan wants to know, Paul, what is your dark horse Heisman candidate? Great question. I am well known publicly as someone who hates the Heisman Trophy because I think it's been destroyed and sublimated and degraded. However, I also hate it as a bettor because it's an inefficient market. So if you add up all the Heisman odds and you percentagize it, convert it to percentages, it's 150% betting market. You don't want to bet in 150% betting markets. You want to bet in 105%, 110% betting markets. That said, you are a loyal watcher and listener, so we got to answer your question. If you want to go dark horse, go Cam Ward at Miami quarterback. So Miami's either going to break all expectations this year or they're going to do more Mario Cristobal nonsense and blow games. Cam Ward will be the guy that either benefits from that or doesn't. So if you're looking for a true dark horse where you can get 25 to 1, I don't know what Cam Ward is right now, that would be your crazy dark horse pick. Don't put the mortgage on it. Put $2, and then you won't feel bad when it inevitably loses. Hey, just one quick thing, Elfie, you'd mentioned about discipline and Texas bringing their A game week to week. You're a guy who's someone in the arts, right?
Yeah.
And it's a field like writing or athletics where people are like, I need to feel inspired. I need to feel, it's like, right. No, actually, this is a craft and this is a trade. And a brick mason doesn't get up in the morning and worry about his inspiration. He goes and starts laying bricks. And that's how I felt writing this book. There are times when you're writing 10, 12-hour days where you get up and you're like, I don't feel like writing. And you're like, why also do my feelings matter? Start writing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of how it is for football. Your feelings don't really matter. I don't really care that you don't feel like playing today. Go play, because that's your craft. That's your trade. And go ply your trade.
Lorne Michaels is very famous for saying, the creator of Saturday Night Live, we don't go on because we're ready. We go on because it's 11:30.
That's it.
That mentality, I think really permeates the need, right, for consistency as we move forward. Miami being having potentially dark horse quarterback. For those of you watching the schedule, the first 2 weeks are actually really good football actually happening in the first 2 weeks. And Miami is playing Florida. So we're going to learn a lot about those programs. Obviously, it's not going to be a definitive data set, but we are going to see a lot of what each of those teams has to offer at the beginning of the year. Is there any other chats that are jumping out at you, Paul?
Yeah, Wayne Watson asks a recruiting question, not necessarily my purview, just because I've had my head down writing a book the last 3 weeks. But with our swing and misses in recruiting this year, how big would it be to lose Fasusi? He's talking about Michael Fasusi, the sort of everything tackle recruit. So Wayne, I think we all have to embrace and indulge a different mindset. We've talked about, I know I've talked about, that we have to change our mindset now that we have playoffs, that if you lose a game, it's not the end of the world. If you don't play in the SEC title game or you lose the SEC title game, it's not the end of the world. You still have another bite at the apple. You could still win the national championship. With recruiting, with NIL, with how aggressive people are making early offers, I've adopted a more philosophical mindset that many of the recruits that you lose in July and August, you might be surprised that we circle back with in November, December. And I think it's hard to do as a recruit, Nick, to adopt that mentality. I do still think Michael Fasusi, from what I know, and I'm not particularly knowledgeable about it, I think he is trending towards Texas, but who knows? We can't control. That's the problem with this NIL bidding and all that, is you can't control what your dumbest competitor will do. I mean, what OU paid for Demonic Williams, we were not willing to pay, and no other school was willing to pay. So you tip your hat and say, enjoy this above average defensive tackle who is the most overpaid player on your roster. So enjoy.
It is a very unique, as they all are. And I know, speaking with Eric about this, and again, not my area of expertise, but Eric himself has pointed out that this is just, it's a roller coaster, and you've got to be prepared for the entirety of the ride. If you're just there for the loop-de-loops or the 90-degree falls, it's going to be a rough go for you. But it is the long haul on this, and especially when you consider the transfer portal. Now, Fasusi's not generally the type of position player that you would see in a transfer portal, but it does happen. So those relationships that the coaches are building with these players now can last a very, very long time. So I would defer to Eric on this and Justin, but I do agree with you, Paul. I think this is one of those things that we can't write it off too early as we're going.
So LC, I think our friend David Keith Williams has another question in the chat, which I think is interesting. And it actually does dovetail with the 2024 Longhorn football prospectus, AKA the Burnt Orange Bible. That's what they're calling it, LC.
It's a good one, which now David has been a prolific commenter. Which one in particular you want to talk about?
I'll read it off to you, buddy. I have recently been considering how good Xavier Filsame, Jordan Johnson-Rubel, Wardell Mack, Kobe Black, and Santana Wilson can ultimately be at Texas. So David, Eric Naline breaks down exactly those guys and does talk about their upside in the preview, because he writes a special section at the end on reviewing the recruiting class. I've also watched them and looked at them. I think Xavier Filsame is going to need a year or two to get more physically mature. If you watched our spring game with the critical eye, you realize that several of our young defensive backs are good, but they've got a lot to learn, and they've got to go into their bodies, because poor Xavier Filsame and Wardell Mack were on a lot of highlights, not in a good way. They were getting posterized. That's to be expected given their age and proficiency level. The guys that I'm super interested in seeing in the future is Kobe Black and Santana Wilson. Wilson has the NFL pedigree from his father. He's got a big body. He's got a lot of subtle traits that project well. And then Kobe Black, anytime you're a huge cornerback, I'm very interested in you, because if you can meet a minimal level of athleticism, you're an NFL player. And if he doesn't pan at corner, I think he actually has a future at safety. So Jordan Johnson-Rubel will be interesting. I think he's a guy that I think on special teams, he could immediately be a contributor just because of his mentality and the grit, the toughness. I think his issue is size and length. He needs to find some ways to compensate for that. Billy Bowman at OU, not a big safety, but he's a freakish athlete and he's got incredible anticipation. you need those traits if you're going to try to play safety at a high college level at 5'9", 5'9.5".
This has been great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's for those of you, just to give you a little bit of insight, when we do this every Saturday, it seems as if Paul is just coming in under the wire because he's been writing this book. So we now have the opportunity to actually talk about it and read it. As a fan myself, I think is really great. This has been about the offense. This to give you any indication, this should just be a small drop in the ocean to let you know how thorough this book is, how detailed this is. And again, we are just scratching the surface on what Paul provides. So we please invite you to buy a copy of that. Support our people, support independent artists, support independent authors. Please go do that. Buy Paul's book. Even if you don't read it, I'm just going to say it. Just buy the book. Just buy the book, whether you read it or not. You'd be a fool not to read it, but read the book and buy the book if you get a chance. On behalf of Paul, thank you so much for this. I want to let you guys know in terms of programming notes, we are very much going to try to get you the defensive version of this, certainly within the next week, maybe two. And then we will take a little pause on Thinking Texas Football before we get into the season. And then Paul and I, or maybe we'll bring back Eric, we'll dive into a little bit more of the details as we get closer to the season. Any final words from you, Paul?
No, I mean, I just appreciate it. If you guys want to buy it, if you can buy the hard copy table version at Amazon. That's the print version. It'll be in your hot hands in 48 hours if you've got Prime, because they print on by order. I mean, Amazon, say what you will, it's excellent, amazing logistical, just monstrosity. I don't know how they do it, but it's incredible. It's also available electronically. If you want it immediately, like right now, go on Smashwords or go on Apple. On Smashwords, if you need to buy it in a Kindle version, they have directions on that. I also have directions on how to do that. You want to buy either the Mobi version or the EPUB version. EPUB is if you have like an Apple reader, an iPad. Smashwords is super easy to convert. There's nothing weird or hard about it. I've literally 85-year-old guys have written me about how easy it was. And then finally, if you don't want to read it and you just want to buy the electronic version, you could treat it as an NFT. It could be worth billions of dollars one day, LC. I'll just throw that out there.
Oh, yeah, we'll just roll that out there and we'll run that past the legal team. I'm sure what he said is 100% true. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate you being here.